to PsychSessions AI, a podcast dedicated to discussing the impacts of AI on the field of psychology. My name is Joe Slade, and I study AI, teaching, and learning at Oregon State University. Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody. This week we're joined by Rob McEntarffer. Rob taught English, psychology, and philosophy for 13 years at Lincoln Southeast High School in Lincoln, Nebraska. Rob earned his PhD in teaching, learning, and teacher education in 2013, focusing on how teachers make room for formative assessment processes in their classrooms. He now teaches at the College of Education at Duane University. Thanks for joining us, Rob.
You bet. And sorry, slight correction, Doane University, D-O-A-N-E.
Doane University.
Yeah.
Doane University, what town is that in?
That is in the neighboring town of Crete, Nebraska, just about 30 miles away.
Very good. So could you share maybe a little bit more about your work and maybe how you've seen AI sort of starting to play a role?
You bet. And everybody listening to this should also know that Joe and I just met each other, but we've already had a lively conversation via email. I introduced myself to Joe because I heard through mutual friends that he was doing this special PsychSessions series, and artificial intelligence is an area of interest of mine. And Joe and I started a lively email exchange about the nature of intelligence and different models of intelligence that we're interested in. So listeners, if they get interested in the topics that we're talking about here, I bet this could be the jumping off point for a lot more discussions, because I think there's wide room for disagreement on this topic. I got interested in the topic via my background. I taught psychology for 13 years at the high school level. And it took me a long time to realize that the cognition chapter that I taught over and over and over again, that memory theory was a major component of that cognition chapter. And it just took me years to realize, oh, gosh, memory theory that I've been teaching could actually help me make some decisions about my pedagogy, about how I teach memory theory. And once that light bulb dawned, it launched me into an exploration of relationships between cognitive psychology, primarily memory theory, and teaching and learning. And I became self-taught in the scholarship of teaching and learning area and tried to meet the people whose research I really admired. And that got me to here through the centrality or the importance of things like productive struggle and cognitive load and attention and schema theory, and how they are integral parts of how our students learn in our classrooms. And then that bumped up against things like so-called some uses I'd heard about artificial intelligence in classrooms seem to be in conflict with that underlying process to me. And I think that got us up to now.
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in there then. So what type of thinking do you think it might be okay to offload to AI? And then, as you just kind of touched on, what's some thinking that maybe it's best we be careful not to replace?
Yeah. So cognitive offloading is a topic near and dear to all of our hearts. We all experiencing it. We experience it whether or not we realize we experience it. We choose to do it when we can because it's way more efficient. I don't have the reference in front of me, but I think there was a recent meta-analysis where the conclusion of it was something seemingly obvious and hilarious, but very true, that humans just don't like to think. Maybe I can look up the reference later, or maybe off the top of your head, we can include it in the notes. But it was a whole bunch of studies that our brains don't seem to want to work harder than they have to in given situations. We'll kind of put the minimal amount of cognitive effort needed for the output that has to happen at that point in time. And that relates to cognitive offloading. So if I have paper near me and a writing utensil, and someone gives me a 10-digit phone number, my brain probably could retain that 10 digits with some effort until I get my cell phone out and type it in. But if it's easy to cognitively offload, I'm just going to write that puppy down, and then I won't have to go through that effort. That relates to current technology in the sense of there's a few important studies or a few studies that I've stumbled across. If you tell people that the next question I'm going to ask you, you'll be able to Google it before you have to answer. Or if you contrast this with telling people, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to ask you to answer that question, and then afterwards you can Google to see if you're right. So testing that independent variable, then you test retrieval afterwards. The folks who had to answer first, even though they knew they could Google it afterwards, tend to retain and be able to retrieve that information longer than the folks who can cognitively offload right away. It's like, I have an escape ramp. My brain has an escape ramp. I don't really have to think about this very much. Therefore, I'm not gonna, because my brain doesn't want to, and I'm not going to retain that information long term. I'm mostly interested in, as a teacher and as a person who teaches future teachers. So given that, what then should we use artificial intelligence in classrooms in order to increase the chances that students will retain important information longer term? And which ones should we avoid so that students aren't just forgetting things immediately afterwards? So this is a long-winded answer to your really clear question that we should never cognitively offload cognitive effort that we know will help students encode important material and be able to retrieve it later on. So it turns out that we can, by looking at our learning objectives, we can come up with a logical sequence, okay, to for the students to be able to understand what negative reinforcement is. They actually have to go through the cognitive effort of understanding the difference between reward and punishment in the first place and its relationship to increasing and decreasing subsequent behaviors, and then the meaning of negative and positive in this context, and then putting it all together. If we allow students to use artificial intelligence to, okay, use AI to come up with 5 examples of negative reinforcement and include those samples on a poster and present it, that's offloading really important cognitive work that students should be doing and is actually going to get in the way of their learning the concept and retrieving it later on. Phew, that was a long answer. Sorry, Joe.
No, I mean, let's dive into, I like that example. Like, let's say that you're having your students write, say, maybe about positive versus negative reinforcement or something like that. Yeah. If you were to give them specific instructions on how to complete an essay with the use of AI, without the use of AI, at what point during the writing process do you think it's okay? And at what point during the writing process would you be sure to tell them it's not in your best interest to use it at that point?
Yeah. These are exactly the kind of questions that I'm super excited the PsychSessions is diving into, and the discussions that I hope teachers are able to start. Because I don't know about you, but the discussions so far that I've heard, at least in the K-12 context, about artificial intelligence have been kind of surface level and all within the context of, well, it'll save everybody time. Mm-hmm. And it would absolutely save time. Boy, my students were annoyed by the concept of negative reinforcement, and I had to spend quite a bit of instructional time to help them understand that the word negative in this context doesn't mean aversive. The word negative means removal in this context.
It's not intuitive. Yeah,
it is. It isn't intuitive at all. And Bill McKeechee, all praise be unto his name, said that he told his friend Fred Skinner that negative reinforcement was a dumb term. So it's really tempting to just tell students, use Claude to generate 5 examples of negative reinforcement, and then we'll talk about them in class. And maybe that would be effective for some students, but I think, then we'd have to test this empirically, but I think for some students, that would actually delay their realization, that this counterintuitive realization that you identified, that the word negative doesn't mean yucky, it means take away. we need their brain to work hard on that distinction before they offload that cognition to Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini to come up with examples. Now, maybe after we do that hard work, and I'm confident as a teacher that everybody understands that negative means minus and positive means plus, and reinforcement means behavior increases and punishment means behavior decreases, and excuse me, I've checked for that understanding, then maybe it might be useful to tell students, okay, let's see if artificial intelligence can do this, and have them use artificial intelligence to generate some examples and non-examples of negative reinforcement, and then they have to use their brains to figure out which are examples and which are non-examples. That might be useful.
Yeah, so maybe actually generating, say, some multiple choice questions or some examples, like you say, where they have to answer yes, no. Maybe checking their work after they finish.
Yeah, and I love that phrase, checking their work. I think a general principle or litmus test is the conclusion that I've come to, or I might have borrowed this from somebody else that I read. I really can't remember. That if we're already expert enough in a topic to check the accuracy of what artificial intelligence comes up with, then we're maybe safe or safer offloading some of that cognition to an artificial intelligence. But when the context is students, I mean, they're there because they don't know jack yet, generally. Mm-hmm. So it can be really dangerous, I think, for them to cognitively offload to artificial intelligence too soon.
Mm-hmm. Of course, if any of us are really honest with ourselves, we know that there are boundaries to what any of us know. And so we probably all run that risk when we are using it for more general purposes. Like you say, if it's a specific purpose, maybe within a specific classroom example where you know that you're going to be able to distinguish between the fact and the fiction. But as soon as you get close to the line.
Yeah. And as psychology teachers, we know about the dangers of overconfidence and the Dunning-Kruger effect. So we have to guard against that. And our students are going to be even worse at it than we are.
And I like you brought up like memorizing digits, like phone number digits. Used to be, I memorized phone numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like maybe I have a few, but as you say, because I'm able to cognitively offload and, I'll take a look for that article that you're mentioning about humans not liking thinking. It's like when we have that opportunity, we tend to take advantage of it. And so now, I mean, Google was one thing, but this seems like a different animal. What impact do you think that's going to have on our tendency as a group to offload?
Yeah. And even before, excuse me, even before the artificial intelligence discussion, a guy named Sam Weinberg, who comes from history instruction, but he wrote a great book called Why Learn History When It's Already on Your Phone. And that discussion was why encode any new information, factual information, into our brains when we know we can Google it? And the counterintuitive answer is it might be even more important to get some factual knowledge into our long-term memories so that we can use that to analyze future information.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that could be a nice segue into you have, let's see here. So you have a blog, robmcentarffer.net. What is it? Not for Points?
Not for Points.
Not for Points blog. One of your posts, you said that you prefer the term large language model as opposed to artificial intelligence. So why do you feel like intelligence within artificial intelligence is something like a misnomer?
Yeah, and this was part of the really interesting discussion that Joe and I started over email. And I might be pedantic about this and maybe just taking words too seriously, but in the psych classes that I taught, when we taught the intelligence and thinking and language chapters, we talked about how intelligence is a really difficult thing to define, and it's a really difficult thing to measure. It's part of the black box problem that we are always dealing with in psychology. We can't really know what's happening inside a person's brain. So intelligence gets defined as problem-solving ability, gets defined behaviorally. Can this question be answered? I think that falls apart in an important way in the artificial intelligence discussion. And I get really annoying, and I usually say so-called artificial intelligence, because I think up till these artificial intelligence discussions, we presumed that the brain was doing something regarding the meaning, usually the meaning of language, the meaning of symbol systems, numbers, words, something, was putting meanings together in order to problem solve. And the underlying principles of concepts and schema and prototypes were the brain was using those. We don't know exactly, and it's very difficult to measure exactly how the brain is doing that. But a human being thinking through a problem, let's say, reads a paragraph that frames the problem, thinks about the meanings of those words in that paragraph and what it means that the words are in that order, and then uses those meanings to put things together in a novel, probably construction, and then expresses a solution to that problem through language based on the underlying meanings. That is so, as far as I can tell, that is so inherently different, almost opposite to what so-called artificial intelligence does within the realm of what's called large language models. So the way I think I understand it is artificial intelligence is an umbrella term for a whole bunch of generative systems that computers can do, generative digital systems. Specifically, when we're talking about language, what ChatGPT does and the other chatbots do is they just either grab or get large blocks of text, either by us typing it in or they scrape text from the internet. They look at a question, they use the text that they've already acquired, they look at all of those words in that order, and they do not try to understand the meaning of those words. Matter of fact, they can't understand the meaning of those words. They just look at the statistical likelihood of what the next words should be. So I think of it as fancy predictive text. It's like the predictive text on the phone. It can know what the next word that we're likely to type is. The large language models just do that in a much bigger way, which is why they use huge amounts of energy. They come up with a statistically likely large block of text. And sometimes the results are amazing. And they create the illusion, what I would call the illusion of intelligence. But I don't think that's what we ever meant by intelligence in the context of human beings. And so I think it was a misnomer at the very beginning. I think calling them large language models, I think, is preferable because it emphasizes that this is just a digital tool that's using a statistical model to predict likely blocks of language.
So in my mind, and let me know how you feel about this, I kind of think of maybe like a deductive versus inductive approach.
Yeah.
So like back in the days of Newell and Simon, when they were coming up with their general problem solver, they were trying to look at some of the cognitive heuristics like the people were using and then trying to represent those in computer code so that then they could have a machine that was able to solve novel problems kind of in a similar fashion to people. And then there were a couple of other systems that, expert systems and other ones that followed that kind of model, kind of deductive, top down. But then with the big data, like you're describing, they are essentially just inductively taking trillions and trillions of words, throwing them into a system and then establishing, probable kind of relationships between words such that when you feed it some text, it's just predicting the next word and then the next word and then the next word.
Yeah.
And so it is, if it does within itself establish some of those same heuristics that we use, they're kind of hidden from view, kind of in that hidden layer. Yeah. And I don't know, like fundamentally, what is the difference? Like what if those heuristics are embedded in that hidden layer, kind of the way that they're embedded in our, neural architecture the same way. Like, what are we doing that's so special aside from the next word, predicting the next word, saying the next
Yeah.
word?
And I might be fooling myself. I freely admit that. I think, and I suspect, and what I'm really interested in research on is, you asked, what are we doing that's so special? My answer is that human beings understand the meanings of words, and we have a concept behind that word. And that word, instead of just being statistically related to other words that were used in proximity to that word in my past experience, it's that word connects with a schema in my long-term memory that has thousands of interconnected, meaningful connections with other things. And I use those meaning connections to plan and generate later language that helps me problem solve and communicate and other things. And I suspect that there's an important difference between those meaning connections that a human being can do and the just statistical proximity and repetitiveness connections that a large language model can do. And this is another gripe. I guess when I talked about this to a group the other day, I used the Simpsons meme, "Old man shouts at clouds," which I kind of feel like I am. So I know I'm a grump about this, but hopefully maybe it's an important grumpiness. In the community, artificial intelligence folks talk about hallucinations. Sometimes an artificial intelligence client will produce what they call hallucination, which is a mistake, and then they work to reduce those hallucinations. I even think that's the wrong term. I think these mistakes are important because it reveals what the artificial intelligence thing is really doing and the limitations of what it's really doing. If any listener of this wants to try it out, you used to be able to create this in a cool way by asking ChatGPT or Gemini or whoever, how many R's are there in the word strawberry? Mm-hmm. And most of them have fixed that now because that one got famous. So the last time I tried that, they were able to generate the right answer, which is 3, right? Yeah, 3. Mm-hmm. But they used to just confidently say 2, and then you would say, "I don't think that's right," and they would apologize profusely and say it's 4. And that's because the unit of analysis was the word and not the letter. So I think they fixed that one. But now you can do the same thing by asking how many syllables are there in a certain word. And it will give you a radically wrong answer, at least the last time I checked. But the reason it's a radically wrong answer isn't just that it's a random hallucination. It's not like a glitch in the matrix. It's revealing that the thing doesn't know what the word means and doesn't know what the word R means, doesn't know what the word syllable means, and can't apply that concept to this problem. So in the context of teaching and learning, I think that's an important revelation that the thing doesn't know what this means. It's just a very convincing illusion of meaning.
I know in our kind of previous exchange, I had mentioned the fact that human behavior seems to be goal-driven. So what I'm trying to understand, like meaning, I don't want to get like way too abstract with this, but like what would that difference be in terms of meaning? Like you say that a large language model looks at word associations and probabilities, whereas we have schemas of meaning. But those schemas of meaning, those are our memories, previous experiences with a topic, whether they were positive experiences, negative experiences, kind of some of the complicating variables surrounding that experience. Yeah. What is it that gives us meaning, like a deeper level of understanding about a thing that's not possible just with statistical probabilities?
Yeah. And this was a really great part of our email conversation. Your bringing up of goal driven was an element I hadn't thought of before. And I think that goal driven aspect is an aspect of that meaning, right? I think another one that we talk about in psychology is emotion. I think many researchers think that it's probably not possible to to engage in cognition emotion free. Emotions are probably inherent in human cognition. So I think goal driven emotionality, like affect, and then also going back to meaningful associations. And maybe this would be interesting to ask developmental psychologists and others. Are there pre-language or non-linguistic meaning relationships that anyone has figured out that human beings engage in that these digital systems don't have access to? And maybe that's an important part of cognition that we need to pay attention to as we learn how to use these new tools and when not to use them.
Be interesting to try to emulate some of those things you just mentioned, like emotions. Say, let's have 5 different prompts.
Yeah,
you know, like 5 different agents. One is really excited, one is angry, one is fearful, one is this, and then have, every time that you prompt it, have it maybe pick one versus another. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool. I bet people are working on that right now, and then ultimately, I think the goal of teaching and learning, the goal of education, is to help a learner make a relatively permanent change in their long-term memory. So that empowers them to do something that they couldn't before. Even if large language models get so good that a student can offload cognition so perfectly and they learn prompting rules so well that they can imitate that learning, I think it's still a failure. Because just being able to imitate the learning isn't learning. Joe and I have talked about this paper called ChatGPT is Bullshit, and I'm not remembering the author's name right now. But it was a really important paper for me. I thought it was a joke paper when I saw the title. But it's an academic take on we have a word for people who don't know what they're talking about, but they're able to produce utterances that sound incredibly likely and are convincing. And that word is bullshit. And we generally don't respect bullshit as much as we do genuine understanding. And I think respect can get translated to, well, maybe that's not what we want in our classrooms.
May I ask maybe kind of how you tend to use AI in your life and your work, and maybe what you're hopeful about, what you're fearful about, kind of in the future based on that?
Yeah, in topics that I feel, and I might be prone to overconfidence, hopefully not the Dunning-Kruger effect, but sometimes when I feel expert enough that I can analyze the output, I'm a Google user, so I've used Gemini primarily to help me with brainstorming. Doing a prompt like, what are 5 different ways to express this idea? And then I'll type the query in. And the large language model will come up with different variations. And sometimes one of those variations isn't a way that I'd thought about it. And I'll tweak that, and that will help me get unstuck from a writing project. Now, the dilemma that I'm in, and I know the APA came up with a citation model for large language models. If I do that, I don't know the answer to this one. If I do that kind of brainstorming and I rework something that Gemini gave me, do I add a parenthetical citation right there or not? Or is that still my work? I don't know. So that's a dilemma that I put myself in, but I mostly use it for brainstorming. Sometimes I just use it for goofing off a little bit. It's an impressive illusion that it can do to change tone on a topic. I also love to try to produce hallucinations with large language models, trying to give it prompts and trick it, in effect, to revealing that it doesn't know the meanings of any of the words that it's producing.
Any fun examples that come to mind?
Just the syllabus one. The syllabus and the strawberry ones were the ones that leaped to mind most readily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. It is also interesting how you can cause it to change its answers so easily. It will, if you tell it it's wrong, it kind of just see, now I'm anthropomorphizing. I was going to say it accepts it, but that's a human thing. It will just generate contradictory text because you told it it was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll never stick to its guns.
Mm-hmm. No pride.
Mm-mm. No pride, no emotionality. And if about a topic that I know nothing about, I'm not going to stick to my guns either.
So would you consider yourself more of a pessimist, more of an optimist?
I would. I'll try and send a follow up on this too. There's a person who tried to put people into categories about enthusiasts and optimists and skeptics and things like that. I'm a skeptic that a technology that can't access the meanings of language can ever achieve what a lot of the Sam Altmans and the enthusiasts talk about with the acronym AGI, the acronym of a true human-like intelligence. Now, I know my argument falls down with the Turing test. It does.
Oh, Turing test? Yeah.
Turing
Yeah.
test, excuse me, not Terman.
Yep.
Wrong researcher. The Turing test. I expect a large language model could fool me with the Turing test. So I guess I'm proposing a new test, but I don't know what that test is. So I'm a skeptic that that a technology that can't understand the meaning of language should ever truly be called intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's using language in an inherently different and importantly in different way. But I'm also very concerned, so I guess this is a different axis. I'm concerned about energy use. The energy consumption is so heavy that I think it's a distraction from some other social work and needs that we have right now. But I am fascinated by its ability to create such a convincing illusion, and that it is possible to create a statistical model that can produce these convincing illusions. Fascinates me.
Yeah. I just remember the first time I used it, I thought it was magic.
Me too. Amazing. Goofed around with it for hours, asking it to write me a scary story, included my kids' names, included the setting where they grew up, and then sent them these fascinating stories that ChatGPT made. It's a super fun goof off tool.
Huh. Do you think that education on the whole benefits from the increased use of technology, or would we be better off just tech-free zones, back to pencil and paper?
Teachers, I don't think I know the answer to that question. We're all going to be working through that for a long time. But as teachers, when we're honest with ourselves, we all 100% want our students to engage in important cognitions. And to the extent that these new technologies allow students to cognitively offload those important cognitions, then we're going to be fighting that tooth and nail for a long time. But I mean, we all know the history of educational technology, and there were people writing when we switched from writing on slates to writing on pencil and paper, to students writing on pencil and paper when they're used to write on their own slates. There were people like me who were shouting at clouds and saying that was the end of the world. And I don't want to be one of those people. So I'm confident that we'll figure out how to use it. But right now, I mean, just a shortcut to students getting the right answers does not increase learning.
Mm-hmm. It's a struggle as well.
It is. It's productive struggle. It's that effortful processing, the semantic encoding. I mean, the whole basis of semantic encoding is the meanings of words. And asking about learning without semantic encoding, I don't know. That's a weird one.
But who likes that?
Exactly.
Well, anything else, Rob, that you want to touch on before we go? Anything exciting in
Oh
your life you
gosh.
want to talk about?
Just to sing your praises and the praises of Psych Sessions in general. Psych Sessions, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm excited about this series that you're doing, Joe. I'm excited. Psych Sessions gives all of us access to conversations like this between the people whose research we read, and that's fantastic. So thanks to Psych Sessions. I'm particularly excited. I just made a job change. So I taught high school for a long time. Then I was in the district office working with assessment evaluation department, doing data analysis and testing and things like that. And most recently, I retired from public schools and I started teaching in a college of education at Doane University. So one of the things I'm excited about at Doane is there's fantastic folks in the psychology department and fantastic folks in the college of education. And we have a whole center of excellence for teaching and learning. And we're a small campus. So getting everybody talking about underlying cognitive psychology principles and how that relates to teaching and learning is my goal for the next 10 years. So I'm excited about that.
That sounds exciting. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great talk.
Well, thanks for this opportunity, Joe. I'm excited to listen to the whole series.
Sounds great. Well, take care. Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for listening to Psych Sessions AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do like, subscribe, or leave a review. All of our episodes, as well as the Psych Sessions newsletter, can be found by visiting psychsessions.org. See you next time.